Before everything fell apart, before the betrayal and humiliation, there was peace. Or at least, what I thought was peace. Back then, I used to believe that family loyalty was unshakable, that if you loved deeply and worked hard enough, the world and your own blood would never turn against you. I was wrong. My name is Olivia Bennett, and this is the story of how I lost everything. My job, my home, and my place in the only family I ever had. Only to rise again, stronger than they could ever imagine. But before the storm came, there was sunlight. I grew up surrounded by ambition. The Bennetts were known in the city as visionaries, builders, leaders, dreamers. My grandfather, Harold Bennett, started our family business from a small warehouse with his 2 sons. My father, Ethan, and my uncle Richard. Together, they built Bennett Enterprises, a logistics and real estate company that grew into a quiet empire. My earliest memories are of visiting Dad at the office. The scent of coffee, the hum of computers, the warmth of people greeting me with smiles. "There's our little boss," they'd say. Dad would wink and tell them, "Someday she'll run this place better than all of us." I used to sit in his chair, swinging my legs and pretending to sign documents. He'd laugh and say, "Just remember, Olivia, leadership isn't about titles. It's about trust." I held on to those words. They became my compass. But life doesn't care about your compass. It turns without warning. When I was 22, just months after finishing business school, my father passed away in a car accident. The world stopped moving that day. I remember the phone call, the static in the air, the way my hands wouldn't stop trembling. I remember sitting in silence afterward, staring at the photo of him on my desk, smiling as if he'd never leave. Uncle Richard was the first one to arrive. He held me while I cried. He said, "I'll take care of you, Olivia. You're my daughter now." And I believed him. He stepped in as interim CEO after Dad's death. The board agreed, and so did I. I was too young, too broken to lead. I just wanted to be useful. So I threw myself into work, trying to keep Dad's vision alive. I worked long hours. I studied every report, every financial statement, every contract. I became the person people came to for solutions. Even Uncle Richard would say, "You're the sharpest Bennett of us all." For years we worked side by side. He handled the executives. I handled operations and growth. Together, we made Bennett Enterprises stronger than ever. Sometimes, when we'd close a deal, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "Your father would be proud." Those words meant everything to me. But then something changed. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. It started the day my grandfather passed away. Grandpa had always been the heart of the family, the voice of reason, when power and pride threatened to tear things apart. His passing left a vacuum, and I didn't realize how quickly ambition would fill it. When the time came to appoint a permanent CEO, the board didn't even hesitate. Uncle Richard had seniority, experience, and charm. He was the obvious choice. I didn't mind. I didn't crave titles. I just wanted to contribute, to honor my father's work. But soon after the announcement, I began noticing small things. The way Uncle Richard stopped asking for my input during meetings, how he'd cut me off mid-sentence in front of others, then act as if nothing happened. The sudden absence of my name in project credits. At first, I thought it was stress. He had more on his plate now. Maybe he was overwhelmed. I convinced myself not to take it personally. But deep down, I knew something was shifting. Then came the office whispers. People who used to greet me warmly began lowering their eyes. The team I led was suddenly reassigned. My work emails went unanswered. I'd find out about major decisions from office gossip instead of company memos. Still, I stayed quiet, loyal, hopeful, until one afternoon, I overheard 2 executives in the hallway. They didn't know I was standing nearby. One said, "You know Richard wants Chloe to take over next year, right?" The other replied, "Of course. Bloodline, right? Olivia's just temporary. That word burned through me like acid. My cousin Chloe, Uncle Richard's only daughter, had always been distant. She'd spent most of her life abroad, floating between luxury schools and exotic vacations. She wasn't cruel, at least not when we were younger, but she never understood what hard work meant. The last time I saw her before everything changed, she'd laughed at me for playing office girl. She said, 'Liv, don't stress yourself with business. Dad will handle it all someday. You should enjoy life.' Now, years later, that someday had arrived, and I wasn't sure I liked what it meant. The day of my grandfather's memorial dinner marked the first real fracture between Uncle Richard and me. I'd given a short speech about Grandpa's legacy, about integrity and humility, values he instilled in us. When I finished, Uncle Richard clapped, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Later that night, he pulled me aside and said quietly, "You should be careful with words like integrity and humility in public speeches, Olivia. They can sound like criticism." "Criticism?" I asked. "I was talking about Grandpa." "Still," he said, his tone suddenly firm. "In a family business, perception matters more than truth. Remember that." That was the first time his voice made me flinch. After that night, I started to feel like a guest in my own family. Meetings were held without me. Contracts I had negotiated were suddenly restructured. My ideas were politely acknowledged and quietly discarded. When I asked Uncle Richard if something was wrong, he gave a cold chuckle. "Wrong? Not at all. You've done well, Olivia. But now that we're growing, the company needs fresh direction, a leadership that understands modern dynamics. Chloe's been studying international business, you know. She'll be joining us soon." There it was, the first tremor of the earthquake that would soon destroy everything. I nodded, hiding my disappointment. I told myself Chloe's arrival wouldn't change anything, that we were family, that she'd respect what I'd built. But I was wrong again. One evening, I stayed late at the office, reviewing reports. As I walked past the conference room, I noticed Uncle Richard and Chloe inside, reviewing something on a projector. The door was slightly open. Chloe was saying, "Are you sure we should keep Olivia around, Dad? She's sentimental, always quoting Ethan's old methods. We need to modernize, not worship the past." My heart pounded. Uncle Richard replied calmly, "Don't worry, Chloe. She'll step aside soon. She just doesn't know it yet." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. That night, I sat alone in my car for hours, staring at the office building glowing in the distance. The place that had once felt like home suddenly looked foreign. Cold, metallic, heartless. I whispered into the darkness, "Dad, what would you have done?" But there was no answer, only silence. When I finally drove home, I found myself replaying every conversation, every warning I'd ignored. I realized then that my father's death had not only left a void in leadership, it had left me unprotected. I was surrounded by people who smiled at me by day and plotted against me by night. Yet I couldn't hate them, not yet. Because a part of me still hoped, foolishly, that love could change them. The next morning, I walked into the office as if nothing had happened. My steps were steady, my face calm. If they wanted a war, they'd get silence first. Silence that watched, learned, and remembered. That was the day I promised myself something. If they ever tried to take away what my father built, I would fight back. I didn't know when. I didn't know how, but I would, and that promise, whispered in the quiet of my heart, would soon become the reason my uncle and his daughter lost everything they thought they'd won, because they underestimated me. And that was their first mistake. When people lose their masks, they don't take them off all at once. They peel them away slowly, piece by piece, until the face beneath is unrecognizable. That's how it happened with my uncle. And Chloe. The day Chloe officially joined the company, the entire office buzzed like a carnival. Her arrival felt more like a celebrity entrance than a new hire. She swept through the lobby in high heels and a designer suit, flashing a smile so bright it almost hid the frost in her eyes. "Olivia," she said, hugging me dramatically. "It's been forever. You look serious as ever." I forced a polite smile. "Good to see you too, Chloe. Welcome aboard." She looked around the office, nodding approvingly. "So this is the empire Dad built. Not bad. A little old-fashioned maybe, but not bad." That was her first sentence on her first day. And somehow, it felt like a warning. At first, I tried to help her. She was new to the company, and despite her attitude, I wanted her to succeed. For family's sake, for my father's memory. I explained our key projects, introduced her to the staff, and even spent nights walking her through our systems. But Chloe wasn't interested in learning. She was interested in controlling. She'd listen half-heartedly, then interrupt. Yeah, I get it," she'd say, waving her hand. "But this method is too slow. We should make things more stylish. I asked once, confused. "We're in logistics." "Exactly," she replied. "Boring. People should feel the brand, not just use it." I laughed softly. "You can't market shipping containers like perfume, Chloe." She stared at me for a moment, her expression cold. "See, that's your problem, Liv. You think too small." After that conversation, everything started shifting. My emails to suppliers started bouncing back with contact change notifications. Chloe was now copied into every major communication thread. She began reviewing my reports before they reached the board, meaning editing, twisting, or deleting parts she didn't like. I confronted her gently one afternoon. "Chloe, please don't alter my reports without discussing it first. The numbers are sensitive." She leaned back in her chair, smirking. "Relax, Olivia. Dad said I could make adjustments. It's all teamwork, right? Teamwork doesn't mean rewriting facts." She chuckled, low and lazy. "Maybe not in your version of teamwork." The worst part was how quickly Uncle Richard began backing her up. Before, he used to drop by my office to ask about projections, to talk about strategy. Now, he barely looked at me in meetings. Everything went through Chloe. Every decision, every sign-off, every presentation. When I tried to discuss it, he'd say, "Olivia, I know this must be difficult, but Chloe is the next generation. You should guide her, not compete with her." Compete. The word stung. "I'm not competing," I said softly. "I just want what's best for the company." He smiled in that patronizing way he'd perfected over the years. "I know you do, but you've been here too long, Olivia. Sometimes people get too attached to old systems. It's time for new blood. Old systems. New blood." He made it sound like I was a relic in my own father's company. Soon, the rumors began. I'd walk into the cafeteria and feel conversations die mid-sentence. People avoided my eyes. Even my assistant, Sarah, who'd worked with me for years, started acting nervous. One day I asked her, "Sarah, is something going on?" She hesitated before whispering, "They're saying you're being replaced. That Mr. Bennett and Ms. Chloe think you're slowing things down." "Slowing things down," I repeated. She looked at me with pity. "I didn't believe it, Olivia, but you should be careful. They're building a narrative." That phrase, "building a narrative," lodged in my chest like a splinter. It became clear soon enough. At the next quarterly review, Chloe presented a slide deck labeled Strategic Renewal. It featured new branding ideas, restructuring plans, and even employee reshuffles, including a proposal to reassign senior management roles for increased efficiency. I scanned the slides and froze when I reached the last page. My position, head of operations, had been marked vacant. Vacant. As if I didn't exist. The room filled with polite applause as Chloe concluded her speech. Uncle Richard beamed proudly. Then he looked at me. Olivia, you've done excellent work building this department. Chloe's new structure will take things even further. I'm counting on your cooperation. I nodded slowly. Of course, Uncle. Always. But inside, something cracked. After the meeting, I went to the rooftop terrace. The one place in the building where no one bothered me. The city stretched out below, glittering and indifferent. I called my best friend Emma, who had worked in finance before moving abroad. Liv, you sound exhausted, she said as soon as she heard my voice. I think they're pushing me out, I whispered. Not openly, but it's happening, slowly, strategically. Your uncle and Chloe, together. It's like they're testing how much I'll take before I break. Then don't break, she said firmly. Watch. Learn. People like that hang themselves if you give them enough rope. Her words lingered. Watch. Learn. So I did. For the next few weeks, I stayed quiet, observant. I took notes of every irregularity. Decisions made without documentation. Financial movements that didn't add up. New consultants, hired at suspiciously high salaries. I didn't confront them yet. I needed proof. Meanwhile, Chloe kept playing her game. She started calling me Livy in front of the staff, a nickname she'd never used before, to sound friendly while undermining me. Oh, Livy's old-fashioned, but she means well, she'd say during meetings, earning fake laughter from people who once respected me. One afternoon, she waltzed into my office uninvited. Guess what, Livy? Dad's giving me my own department. Strategic expansion. Isn't that exciting? I looked up from my desk. Congratulations, she smiled. He says I remind him of himself. You know, ambitious, visionary, focused on the future. I wanted to ask her what she knew about the past, about the sweat and tears that built the empire she was now decorating with her ego. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I said quietly, I hope you know what you're doing, Chloe. Power isn't a toy. She tilted her head, still smiling. Neither is weakness. And she walked out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and arrogance behind her. Then came the projects. One by one, everything I'd worked on was transferred to Chloe's team. Contracts I negotiated were suddenly rewritten. Clients I'd built relationships with started calling her instead. When I asked Uncle Richard why, he said, it's for efficiency. You've got too much on your plate, too much on my plate. I'd lived and breathed that company for years. It became clear. They weren't just taking my authority. They were erasing my presence. But the real knife came from someone I least expected. One afternoon, I was called into Uncle Richard's office. He looked unusually serious. Papers were spread across his desk. Olivia, he began, I've been reviewing our financial records, and there are discrepancies. Discrepancies, I repeated. Yes, certain funds missing from your department's budget. Significant ones. My heart skipped. That's impossible. I review every expense myself, he sighed heavily, sliding a folder toward me. I want to believe that, but Chloe found these anomalies. If the board gets wind of it, it'll be bad for everyone. Maybe you should take a break, a few weeks off, just until things calm down. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a warning. I opened the folder. The documents inside were manipulated. Numbers rearranged. Signatures forged. I recognized them as copies of the reports Chloe had reviewed. You think I did this? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence said everything. That night, I didn't go home. I sat in my car in the empty parking lot, staring at the company's glowing logo reflected in the windshield. This was my father's dream. And now, it was being used to destroy his daughter. Tears blurred my vision, but I refused to let them fall. I remembered what Emma said. Don't break. So I whispered to myself, you want a villain, Uncle Richard? Fine, but I'll be the kind of villain who wins. I drove home in silence, my mind already shifting. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd learn the rules. Because sometimes, revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with awakening. And in that moment, under the hum of city lights, I woke up. Everything that followed, the betrayal, the humiliation, the loss, all of it began here. In this quiet realization, they weren't trying to sideline me. They were trying to erase me, and I was done letting them. I used to believe that family was the safest place a woman could belong to. But after that night, I wasn't sure anymore. When my uncle removed me from the company, I tried to stay strong. I told myself I'd rebuild, that maybe, deep down, he'd come to his senses. But every time I looked at his daughter, Lily, my cousin, I saw the glint of victory in her eyes. She walked around my home as if she owned it. My father had left me that house, his last gift before passing away, and yet Lily acted like it was her playground. At first, it was small things. She'd change the furniture around without asking. She'd hold friends' parties and leave the place a mess. Then, she started calling my uncle over, whispering things behind closed doors. I could feel the storm coming. One morning, I found Lily standing at my dining table, sipping coffee in her silk robe. She looked me up and down, my hair messy, my eyes swollen from another sleepless night. You know, Olivia, she said casually, it's kind of sad. You had everything. The house, the business, the name, and now you're, well, you. Her words stung more than I expected. This is still my home, Lily, I replied. You're just a guest, she laughed. We'll see about that. And she walked away, humming. I didn't realize it then, but that was her warning. A week later, I returned home after meeting a lawyer. I wanted to fight back, find a legal way to regain my position at the company. But when I reached the gate, I froze. My key didn't fit. The locks had been changed, and standing at the door with her arms folded was Lily. Oh, Olivia, she said mockingly. Didn't you get the notice? Daddy decided that the house now belongs to the company. And since you're no longer part of it, you can't stay here. I could barely breathe. You can't do this, I shouted. She smirked. Oh, I already did. Behind her, I saw movers. Strangers. Carrying out my furniture. My father's portrait. The few things that still felt like home. It was like watching my life being erased in real time. You have 10 minutes to take what's yours, Lily said, glancing at her nails. After that, the door locks for good. I stood on the front porch, clutching my father's watch, a few clothes, and a box of old photographs. The sky was heavy, threatening rain. I looked back one last time at the place that once held laughter, warmth, and my father's voice. Now it belonged to them. But as I walked away, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to cry. If my uncle and his spoiled daughter thought they could destroy me, they had no idea who they were dealing with. They took my company. They took my home. But they forgot. I still had my name, and I was going to make sure the world remembered it. When I left that house for the last time, I told myself, no one takes everything from me and walks away untouched. I didn't know how I'd fight back yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't done. I moved into a small apartment on the edge of the city. Cracked walls, no proper lighting, the kind of place where even your own echo feels lonely. It wasn't much, but it was mine. For the first time in months, I could breathe without hearing my uncle's voice echo in my head. Every night, I'd sit by the window, staring at the skyline, the tall glass building that held my company's name, still glittered under his control. My name, my father's legacy, his empire. And it burned inside me. Days passed. Weeks blurred into each other. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, while scrolling through old company records, I had backed up on my personal drive. I noticed something strange. Irregular payments, unapproved transfers, and hidden projects under my uncle's new leadership. At first, I thought it was an error, but when I checked again, it was clear. He was moving money offshore, covering tracks with fake accounts. He wasn't just a thief of my position. He was a criminal, hiding behind my family's name. And for the first time in months, I smiled, because now I had leverage. I started rebuilding from the shadows. I contacted former employees, the ones my uncle had fired, people who once respected me. Many of them were hesitant at first, but when they heard my voice again, something changed. "Olivia, we thought you disappeared." "No," I said, "just preparing." One by one, they joined me. A quiet team forming under the radar. We began digging deeper, collecting files, tracing money trails, recording conversations. I didn't go public yet. I waited. I wanted them to believe I was broken, because nothing is more powerful than a woman the world underestimates. One evening, I received a call from a familiar voice, Ethan. He used to work in finance for the company before my uncle demoted him. He was loyal to me, even back then. "Olivia," he said, "you were right. The offshore accounts, they link back to a company registered in Lily's name." I froze. Lily. So she wasn't just a spoiled accomplice. She was involved in the fraud herself. "Send me everything," I told him. The next morning, I had proof. Emails, transfers, falsified signatures, enough to destroy both of them. But I didn't move yet. Revenge wasn't about rushing. It was about timing. While they flaunted their new lifestyle, expensive cars, media interviews, photos at charity events, pretending to be the perfect family business duo, I was quietly building my foundation again. I launched a new startup. Small, discreet, under a different name. We offered consulting to companies that had suffered corporate takeovers or internal fraud. It was ironic, helping others rebuild while plotting the same against my uncle. And within months, it started growing. But success wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want my life back. I wanted them to feel the humiliation, the emptiness, the same betrayal they gave me. One rainy evening, as I walked home, I got a news alert on my phone. CEO Martin Ellis announces daughter Lily as new vice president. I stopped under the streetlight, raindrops soaking my hair, and laughed bitterly. They were digging their own graves, because soon, the higher they climbed, the harder they'd fall. Inside my tiny apartment, I pinned their photos on the wall. Not out of hatred, out of focus. "You taught me how to fight," I whispered to the empty room. "Now, watch me win." The silent war had begun. People think revenge is about anger, fire, chaos, destruction, but they're wrong. Real revenge is quiet, calculated. It's a whisper that becomes a storm. That's what I became. A whisper. From my small apartment, I spent nights building a plan. Not just any plan. One that would make my uncle destroy himself, piece by piece. And the key to that plan was his greed. My uncle Martin Ellis had one fatal flaw. He always wanted more. Even when he took my father's company, it wasn't enough. He wanted fame, recognition, power. And Lily, she wanted attention. She lived for social media, flashing designer bags, announcing business successes that she barely understood. They were both predictable, and that made them easy targets. Step one of my plan was simple. Temptation. Through my new consulting firm, the one they didn't know was mine, I created a fake investment opportunity. A shell company with clean records, glamorous investors, and a fabricated history of rapid profit growth. We called it Eterna Holdings. Ethan helped me set it up, disguising all connections to me. Then, using a proxy contact, a fake international advisor, we reached out to my uncle's company, offering them a partnership that seemed too good to be true. And of course, Martin took the bait. A few weeks later, I saw the press release. Ellis Corporation partners with Eterna Holdings to expand overseas. I could almost hear my uncle bragging about it at one of his champagne dinners. He had no idea the company he just partnered with was mine. Behind the scenes, I was recording every transaction, every confidential file he sent, every meeting note. He was handing me his empire piece by piece, wrapped neatly in arrogance. But I didn't stop there. Step 2. Exposure. Lily was always the easier one to manipulate. I began following her online again, quietly, from a fake account. She posted everything, her travels, her gifts, even documents she wasn't supposed to share. And then, one night, she posted something that made me smile. A photo of a luxury handbag, with a caption, "Business deal bonuses are sweet. Thanks Eterna Holdings." That was my opening. I took screenshots, compiled them with evidence of her offshore accounts, and began stitching the story together. But I didn't leak it yet. I wanted one more push. Then came step 3, humiliation. I organized an investor conference through Eterna Holdings, an event meant to announce the merger. I invited Martin and Lily as guests of honor. They arrived dressed like royalty, Lily in a golden gown, Martin in a tailored suit, flashing smiles for photographers. I watched from the back of the hall, unnoticed, wearing a simple black dress, invisible, yet in control of everything. When the presentation began, the lights dimmed and the projector lit up. But instead of business slides, the screen flashed with something else: bank transfers, offshore accounts, Lily's fake invoices, Martin's forged approvals. The audience gasped. Reporters started shouting questions. Cameras clicked. Martin's face turned white. Lily's mouth fell open. I stepped forward slowly, microphone in hand. My voice echoed through the room. I believe you all deserve to know the truth. The Ellis Corporation has been laundering money through its executives' private accounts, under the name of Family Trust. The spotlight hit me. Martin's eyes widened in horror. "Olivia," he whispered. I smiled. "Long time no see, Uncle." The room exploded with chaos. Flashes, shouts, panic. Martin tried to defend himself, but it was too late. The evidence was undeniable, and I had already sent copies to financial regulators and the press. Lily fled in tears. Martin was escorted out for questioning, and I just stood there, feeling the power return to my veins. For the first time in years, I wasn't the victim. I was the storm. Later that night, I walked to the old house, my house, the one they had thrown me out of. It stood silent, empty now, sealed off with police tape. I touched the cold gate and whispered, "Dad, it's over." I took it all back, but what I didn't know then was that Martin wasn't done. He had one last secret, one that would test how far I was willing to go for revenge. The night after the conference was supposed to bring me peace. I thought I had finally won. My uncle was facing investigation. Lily's reputation was in ruins, and the empire they stole was crumbling. But revenge doesn't always end with victory. Sometimes, it opens a door you didn't know existed, a door you may not want to walk through. That night, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Harold Bennett, my father's old lawyer. "Olivia," he wrote, "I think it's time we talked. There are things about your father's will you were never told." My heart stopped. The next morning, I met him in his small office, the same one I remembered visiting as a child when my father would sign documents there. The smell of old books and paper filled the air. Harold looked older now, his hands shaking slightly as he poured coffee. "I've been waiting for the right time to tell you this," he said, sliding a dusty folder across the table. "But when Martin took over the company, he threatened to ruin my career if I said a word." I frowned. "Tell me what," he sighed. "Your father didn't want Martin to have any part of the company. In his original will, he left everything, the shares, the house, the business, solely to you." My pulse quickened. "Then how did Martin?" "He forged an amendment," Harold said quietly. "With the help of someone on the inside, he made it look like your father changed his mind before he died." I froze. The air felt heavy. "Forged?" I whispered. "You're saying my father never wanted him to have control?" "Not even a fraction. Your father trusted you. He told me once that you had his spirit. Not his ambition, but his integrity." For a moment, I couldn't speak. I felt my throat tighten, my eyes sting. All these years, I had blamed myself for not being strong enough, not being clever enough. But the truth was, I had never been weak. They had just lied. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of the original will, my father's handwritten notes, and even a letter addressed to me. The envelope was yellowed with age, but his handwriting was unmistakable, firm, precise. My fingers trembled as I opened it. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to protect you. I know your uncle, his charm, his hunger for control. Promise me you'll guard what's yours, and never let anyone convince you that you're less capable because you're kind. Kindness is not weakness. It's strength in disguise. Always remember, the company is yours. The house is yours. My legacy is yours." Tears spilled onto the page before I could stop them. For years I had felt my father's absence, like a wound that never healed. But reading those words, it was as if he was there again, standing beside me, whispering, "You were right to fight." Harold watched me silently. "There's one more thing," he said. "Your uncle also took control of a hidden trust your father created. A large one. It was meant to fund your future projects. I have reason to believe Martin diverted those funds into his personal accounts." I wiped my tears and looked up. My grief began to shift, transforming into cold, sharp resolve. "Then I'm taking everything back," I said. "Every cent, every lie, every stolen dream." Harold nodded, almost proud. "Your father would have wanted that." That night, I returned to my apartment and spread the documents across the table. I read through every page, every forged signature, every date Martin had changed. The more I read, the angrier I became. But it wasn't blind anger anymore. It was focused, purposeful. Martin hadn't just taken my company. He had stolen my father's dying wish, and for that, he was going to lose everything. A week later, I went to the press again. This time not with revenge, but with truth. I released the original will, my father's letter, and the proof of forgery. The story broke everywhere. CEO, Martin Ellis, accused of forging late brother's will. Family betrayal, scandal deepens. Olivia Ellis reclaims her legacy. The public turned. Investors withdrew. Martin's board members resigned one by one. Lily deactivated all her accounts, disappearing from the spotlight, and I stood in the ashes of their empire. The empire they built from my father's blood. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. But victory isn't the same as peace. Because late one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, the voice on the other end sent chills down my spine. "You think it's over, Olivia?" Martin's voice rasped. "You destroyed me. Now it's my turn." And the line went dead. I stared into the darkness of my apartment, the hum of the city fading into silence. The war wasn't over. It was just changing shape. After the news broke, my uncle vanished. His name was dragged through every headline, his company under investigation, and his assets frozen. For weeks I didn't hear from him. Not a call, not an email. Part of me hoped it was over. But monsters don't disappear quietly. They wait, and then they strike. It started with whispers. My new investors received anonymous letters accusing me of fraud. The same fraud my uncle had committed. Then my new office was vandalized. Glass shattered. Files missing. When I checked the CCTV, I saw a blurred figure, limping slightly, wearing a dark coat. Even through the grainy footage, I recognized that limp. Martin. He was back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, my father's watch ticking softly beside me, and thought about everything that had led to this. He had destroyed my peace, my home, my reputation, and I had taken it all back. But now he wanted war, and I wasn't afraid anymore. When he called the next morning, I answered calmly. "You've made quite a mess for yourself," I said. He laughed, a low, bitter sound. "You took my life's work, Olivia. Do you really think I'll let that stand?" "Your life's work," I snapped. "You mean my father's company, the one you stole and bled dry?" There was silence. Then he whispered, "He always loved you more. Even as a child, he never saw what I could do. So I took what should have been mine." His words chilled me. Not because of what he said, but how calmly he said it. It wasn't just jealousy. It was obsession. "You didn't deserve his empire," I said, "and now the world knows it." "Enjoy your throne while it lasts, my dear," he hissed. "You'll soon find out what happens when a king falls, and a queen is left alone." The line went dead. The next day, one of my employees rushed in, panicked. "Ms. Ellis, the press just got hold of confidential financial records. Someone's framing you." And there it was. Martin's final move. He had planted fake documents to make it look like I was the one laundering money through Eterna Holdings. The same trap I had used against him. It was poetic, twisted, but poetic. I realized I had two choices: defend myself publicly and risk everything, or face him directly, once and for all. I chose the latter. I tracked him down to an old countryside property, one that used to belong to our family before he sold it years ago. It was isolated, surrounded by withered trees and broken fences, the kind of place where ghosts of the past felt alive. When I entered, he was sitting by the fireplace, nursing a drink, his eyes hollow but sharp. "Come to finish me off, Olivia?" he asked. "No," I said softly. "I came to end this. For good," he laughed. "You think you've won. I may be ruined, but you'll never wash your hands clean. The moment you played my game, you became me." I stepped closer, my voice steady. "No, Uncle, I didn't become you. I became the woman you feared I'd be, one who doesn't need to cheat to win." He stood, anger flickering in his eyes. "You destroyed our family. You destroyed it the moment you forged my father's will." He froze. For the first time, he looked fragile, almost human. Then he said quietly, "He was supposed to leave it to both of us, but he didn't. He left everything to you." I couldn't accept that. Tears welled in my eyes. Not of pity, but of understanding. His entire life had been a competition he invented, and he lost. "You could have had me by your side," I said. "We could have built something together." "I don't share power," he whispered. And that was his truth. That's why he lost everything. Not because of me, but because of himself. I turned to leave. "You wanted to destroy me, Uncle, but all you ever did was destroy yourself." As I walked out, I heard the faint sound of glass shattering. His drink, thrown at the wall. I didn't look back. Days later, I was summoned to testify before the corporate fraud board. My uncle's final attempt to frame me had failed. The authorities traced the false records back to his old associates. He was charged with multiple counts of embezzlement, forgery, and corporate fraud. And as the verdict was read, I stood at the back of the courtroom, silent, composed. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. He already knew. After the trial, Lily reached out to me. I almost ignored her message, but curiosity won. When we met at a quiet cafe, she looked different, humbled, exhausted. "I didn't know, Olivia," she said softly. "He told me you were the one stealing from the company." I believed him. "Belief doesn't erase betrayal," I replied. She nodded, tears filling her eyes. I deserved that. I just wanted to say, "I'm sorry for everything." I studied her face. For years, I had imagined this moment, how I'd lash out, how I'd make her feel the pain she gave me. But instead, I just said, "I hope you learn from it," because true revenge wasn't just about destroying others. It was about walking away unbroken. Weeks later, I returned to my father's house, fully restored to my name. The scent of old wood and familiar memories greeted me. I walked through the empty halls, touched the walls, the staircase, the portrait of my father smiling down at me. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. "It's all back where it belongs." Outside, the sun was setting, the same way it did on the day I was thrown out. But this time, the light felt different. It wasn't fading, it was returning. I reopened the company under a new name, Ellis Legacy Group, a company built not on greed, but on integrity. I hired back the employees my uncle had fired. We started small, but strong, and every time I looked out of my office window, I remembered everything I had lost, and everything I had gained. I wasn't the same woman who once stood on the street, clutching a box of her memories. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone unshakable. Months had passed since the trial, the chaos, the betrayal, the long nights of planning. All of it had finally settled into silence. For the first time in years, my mornings began with peace instead of panic. I'd wake up to sunlight spilling across my window, a cup of coffee in hand, and quiet music in the background. There was no more shouting boardrooms, no more whispered schemes, just stillness. One afternoon, I visited my father's grave. The air was calm, the sky pale blue, the world finally at ease. I knelt down and brushed a leaf off the stone, tracing his name with my fingers. "It's over, Dad," I said softly. "He can't hurt us anymore." I paused, feeling a lump in my throat. You know, there were times I wanted to destroy him completely, to make him suffer the way he made me suffer. But then I realized, I smiled faintly. Revenge isn't about ruin. It's about reclaiming what they tried to steal. Your voice, your worth, your peace. For a moment, the breeze carried the faint scent of cedar and rain, my father's favorite cologne, and I felt it, that quiet approval, that sense that he was proud of me. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a women's business conference. The same community that once turned away from me now welcomed me with admiration. Standing on that stage, looking at hundreds of faces filled with hope, I said, "When they betray you, they expect your silence. When they hurt you, they expect your defeat. But when you rise, calm and steady, that's the loudest revenge there is." The audience applauded, but inside, I wasn't thinking of applause. I was thinking of that scared, broken girl who once stood outside her own home, locked out by family. She had finally found her way back, not just to success, but to herself. That night, as I closed my office and looked out at the city lights, I realized something profound. All those years of pain had built me, layer by layer, into someone stronger than I ever imagined. I no longer hated my uncle. I pitied him, because for all his money and ambition, he never knew peace. And peace, I finally had in abundance. A year later, Ellis Legacy Group had flourished. What started as a small revival became a thriving enterprise, known for ethical leadership and community trust. Every project, every partnership, bore the mark of resilience. And yet, what mattered most wasn't the company. It was the people, the ones who stayed, who believed, who helped me rebuild when everything was ashes. One evening, as I was leaving the office, I saw a young woman waiting by the elevator. She looked nervous, clutching a folder. "Ms. Ellis?" she asked timidly. I just wanted to say, your story inspired me to start my own business. Everyone told me I couldn't, that I wasn't strong enough. But I watched your interview, and it changed how I saw myself. I smiled warmly. Don't ever let them decide your worth. The only person who gets to define you is you. She thanked me and walked away. And I stood there for a moment, realizing something. Maybe this influence, this spark, was the true inheritance my father meant for me. Not just a company, but a legacy of courage. That night, I returned home. The same house my cousin once threw me out of. It had been restored. Every broken thing repaired. Every memory reclaimed. As I walked through the halls, I felt no bitterness anymore. Only peace. And pride? I paused by my father's portrait in the hallway, smiling softly. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "Everything finds its way back home." I poured myself a glass of wine, stepped out onto the balcony, and looked up at the city skyline. The air was cool, the night quiet. Somewhere out there, my uncle lived his life in solitude. A man consumed by the empire he tried to steal. And I lived in the calm after the storm. I didn't win because I destroyed him. I won because I didn't let him destroy me. And as the night breeze brushed against my skin, I whispered the final words to myself. A promise and a lesson. Revenge is never about hatred. It's about restoration, taking back what was taken, and learning that sometimes the most powerful victory is peace. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next one. Peace out.